We're live.
Okay, thank you. It is now 3 o'clock, and I'm going to introduce myself, and we'll give a few minutes for a few other people to show up before we get started. My name is Alex Chapin, and I want to thank you for joining the webinar. The webinar is being recorded, and it's live streamed to YouTube, and it'll be available after the fact to watch on YouTube as well. And for now, I'm going to give it 2 minutes, and then we will start off with introductions and going into the presentation. Okay. Thank you for joining us, those who may have come in the last couple of minutes. Again, my name is Alex Chapin, and today we have a presentation on giving effective presentations. And this is going to be provided by Dr. Lisa Ng, PhD at the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST. This webinar is hosted by the BIPSA USA Research Committee with the goal to share new ideas from research to the building simulation community. Later, I'm going to provide a link in the chat that you can use to express your interest in joining the research committee. The presentation today is going to be about 40 minutes, and there'll be time for questions and answers at the end. But feel free to put your questions in the Q&A panel throughout the presentation, so that way we have a list to go through. And I will unmute you and ask if you want to speak your question out loud. And if not, I guess put in chat or in your question whether or not you want to speak, and then I will ask the question if you don't want to do it yourself. And now I'd like to introduce Lisa. Dr. Lisa Ng is a mechanical engineer in the Indoor Air Quality and Ventilation Group at the National Institute of Standards and Technology, and has over 10 years of experience in research in airflow and indoor air quality performance in buildings. Her research interests include applying multi-zone airflow and indoor air quality models to a range of building performance issues and communicating that research effectively. Lisa has been a member of BIPSA USA since 2020 and a member of Toastmasters since 2016. She has been a past area director, club president, club vice president of education, club treasurer, and club sergeant at arms at her home club at the NIST.
Thank you so much, Alex, and thank you to BIPSA USA and the research committee for inviting me to give this talk. To those of you who may be presenting next week at the BPAC conference, or for those who want to get better at speaking, whether that's on the fly or at your next presentation. This will be interactive, so I'll ask you to use the chat at times to be able to put the skills that we're learning today to use right away. If you have questions, again, put them into the Q&A box. I probably won't be able to address them until the end because I only have one screen and can't see that box. So please put them in there. We will address them at the end. So Toastmasters has been around since 1924, and it's helped people from diverse backgrounds become more confident speakers, communicators, and thus leaders. It is a nonprofit organization and has a very wide network of clubs. They speak in different languages. They are all over the world, and there are over 360,000 members currently. So I am part of the NIST Toastmasters Club, which is a club run by our own staff, and we've been around for over 50 years. We currently meet virtually, but are hoping to move into hybrid meetings. And we like to help each other provide a safe space to improve our public speaking skills, but also build our leadership skills. We get to meet people from all around our organization, and we get to improve our speaking skills and also speech writing skills, and so much more. So if you want to find a club near you, you can go to toastmasters.org and find a community club or even a corporate club, or you can also start your own. So there is a funny quote out there by an author of this book called Speaking Up Without Freaking Out. And it says that people would rather stand naked while on fire, overlooking a 30-story fall covered with spiders and snakes. They would rather do all that than give a speech. So public speaking can be very scary. Your heart might be racing, you might feel flushed, your palms might be sweaty. But we're here today to show you that you can develop the skills so that it doesn't have to be that scary. Now, communication is a key skill, just like your technical skills, your math skills, your writing skills. Communication is a skill, and it's something that you can get better with over time. It's not something that you're necessarily born with, but it's something that you can improve in. And you can strengthen your communication skills with regular practice, whether that's talking to people every day via screen, talking to people every day, person to person, preparing speeches like you would through Toastmasters, or any other way that you would practice speaking. Communication helps build strong relationships with others so that you can avoid misunderstandings and have a connection with those that you work with and that you interact with. And lastly, Toastmasters believes that communication is a key to success, because when you can clearly communicate your ideas or those of others, you can succeed in your personal life, in your work life, in all areas of your life. There are many forms of communication, but today we're going to focus on the verbal communication. So we're going to learn ways to craft our presentation so that we can speak confidently, understanding what's in the slides, understanding how to give it confidently. We're going to also try to avoid filler words and avoid jargon when possible. Even though we're talking to a very specific technical crowd, your form of work or your form of research might be very specific, and it's always good to speak to a general audience. So how can you succeed at your next presentation? At Toastmasters, we have learned the 5 P's of presentation, and they are planning, preparation, consistency, practice, and performance. Now, you're probably wondering why the 3rd P is a C, and that's because it stands out as the inconsistent P in the 5 Ps. And so when you have inconsistencies in your presentation, in your communication, it really stands out. So that's why we have to focus on consistency in our presentation so that it doesn't stick out like a sore thumb and it flows nicely with everything. So today we will talk about each of these except for practice. Practice, unfortunately, is something that you'll have to do on your own. But planning, preparation, consistency, and performance are all the topics that I'd like to cover today to help you prepare for your next presentation. So when planning for your next presentation, you probably already heard the W's plus the H, the who, what, where, when, why, and how of your story. Now you may think, but my work isn't a story. It's a timeline of the things that I did, my inputs and my outputs. But I'm here to tell you that when you give your presentation like a story, people are more engaged. People love stories. People can recall stories, but not facts. So if you would interact with me today, if you could put your next presentation into one sentence, are you able to tell us what your next presentation will be? So I'm going to open up the chat, and I love to see everyone put into the chat their next presentation, their topic. What's it going to be about? What do you want to tell people? What do you want them to walk away with? Or if you want to think about it like a story, what's the moral of the story? So go ahead, put it in the chat, and I'll read them out loud. Or perhaps it's a presentation you've already given at a previous conference. You can put that in the chat too. Oh, the chat is disabled. Well, sorry about that. If you want to put them into the questions, then you can do that too. But Nathaniel put into the chat using Python to achieve faster daylighting simulation. That's very good. That's very succinct, easy to understand, and I know what I'm going to walk away with.
I just allowed people to use the chat. Sorry about that. You should be able to use the chat now.
All right. Thank you, Alex. No problem. So please, everyone use the chat so that Nathaniel doesn't have to be the only one who answered. And thank you for everyone else who put it into the question and answer. All right. Teresa said, how to talk to strangers. That is a very good, succinct, very interesting title that I think a lot of people would like to attend if it was me. Anybody else? All right. Adriana put looking after our well-being during a challenging period. Olga wrote how to speak with confidence. Oh, these are great. These are great one-liners to summarize your talk. All right, so in the interest of time, we're going to keep moving, but Nico put in understanding the performance of a national network. And then Alex put how SEED can help implement BPS workflow. Excellent. Thank you so much for interacting with me using the chat there. So keep that one sentence in mind because we're going to go back to it later on. Now, in another way that you need to plan is to know how much time you have. So I've been told at the BPAC conference coming up next week that you'll have 60 minutes to give your presentation. So you can split that up into the 15-minute blocks of why, what, so what, and allow time for Q&A. Now, the so what is really important. We kind of want to jump into the what really quickly, but setting up the story, telling the story, and then retelling the story or summarizing for them so that people understand why that story you told them is important is really good to really solidify that story in people's minds. So when you're planning your next speech, try to answer some of these who, what, where, when, why, how questions. Always point toward that one sentence that you wrote in the beginning. And then split up your time wisely. You don't want to spend too much time giving the upfront information and very little time on what you did. But you also don't want to spend all the time on what you did and people don't have a story to set them up. Because remember, while you may be an expert in the story that you're telling, other people in the audience may be hearing it for the first time, and you want to ease them into your story, tell them all the details, and then at the end, summarize what you told them so that they can walk away with understanding what they just heard. Now, and for preparation, you want to think about who is your audience. So for the conference coming up next week, there may be architects, engineers, building energy modelers, other building related modelers. So I do airflow simulation, contaminant simulation. And when I went to a conference such as the one next week, during some presentations, I can feel a little lost because energy modeling is not my bread and butter. It is not something that I do every day. So if you're able to tell your story in a general manner, I can almost guarantee that no one's going to complain that it was too simple, because even the most expert things that you do, if you tell them in a way that is simple and clear, they'll walk away with more appreciation for it. Here's a tip on how to plan for your next speech, how to verbally communicate it, even how to put it clearly on the screen. So the first tip is to use active language. So here I've written a sentence in passive language. The lighting load was assumed to be 220 watts per meter squared. So on a piece of paper, in your mind, in the chat, I would like you to make this sentence an active sentence. So instead of something was assumed, flip it around so that it's not passive voice. I don't want to give it away too much. So I'll just let you take a minute to put that into active voice. No guesses? Okay, maybe I'll give you this one, and that way at the next one you'll get a flow of what I mean here. So the passive voice is the lighting load was assumed to be 220 watts per meter squared. This is a sentence that I've probably written in journal publications, probably something I've written on a screen, but I want you to try to use the active voice. And Stuart put in the chat, we set the lighting load too, and that is really good. Yes, Olga says the lighting load was at 220 watts per meter squared. And Steven said, I assume the lighting load ... Very good. These are great. When you tell a story, you want to put it into first person so that it's not this third person perspective. It's not this outside perspective. It's not this other person out there who's doing this. It's you who's doing it or your team who did it. And then Michelle wrote, life after the pandemic, getting back into it. Yeah, that's right. Getting back into interacting, I think. All right, so I will click here. So the active voice is the assumed lighting load was 220 watts per meter squared. And all the ones in the chat, all great. But you notice that the passive voice used 9 words and the active voice used 7 words. Now you might think 2 words isn't a big deal, but if you're giving a speech that's within a certain amount of time, you want to conserve your words. You want to get your message out as clearly possible. Now remember, some people might be hearing your story for the first time. And so when you say things in passive voice, they have to flip the sentence in their head. And that requires some mental gymnastics. So when you put it into active voice, they can follow along with you very clearly. Oh, someone says there's an echo. Does anyone else hear an echo? Sorry, Olga, maybe you want to check your speaker. You might have 2 speakers in your environment. So I'm going to keep on going. Thank you, everyone, for the feedback. Appreciate it. All right, another tip, if you want to avoid using the passive voice in a sentence, if the sentence makes sense by adding the phrase by zombies at the end, then it's in passive voice. So the lighting load was assumed to be 220 watts per meter squared by zombies. The zombies assumed that the lighting load was 220 watts per meter squared. So you don't want to do that. But if you put by zombies in the second sentence, the assumed lighting load was 220 watts per meter squared by zombies. That one doesn't sound as good. So try to use that tip if you want to know if you're speaking in the passive or the active voice. All right, another tip for using clear language is to not turn verbs into nouns. So here's another activity for you all. The minimization of EUI was achieved through reducing air leakage. So if you see the letters ION, it's probably someone trying to turn a verb into a noun. So how would you turn this sentence into using verbs and not nouns? So the minimization of EUE was achieved through reducing air leakage. So how do you change a minimization noun into a verb? All right, Stuart wrote that zombies minimize the EUI by reducing air leakage. Excellent. So he took my previous by zombies tip and flipped it around to use it to make sure that we use verbs and not nouns. Michelle says to minimize, yes. So instead of using minimization, we should use the phrase to minimize or minimize itself. Excellent. And then Carrie wrote, we minimize the EUI through reducing ... Excellent. You all are doing excellent. And then Santiago said, reducing air leakage, minimize the EUI. Also very good. And you see, we also reduce the number of words in the sentence. So instead of 10 words, in that first one, we only use 6 words in the second one. Again, when you're telling your story out loud and you're not reading it, you have to do a lot of mental gymnastics to think about what was minimized, what were you minimizing, how you minimized it with that first sentence. But with the second sentence, it was very clear. Reducing air leakage, minimize EUI. And that's only 6 words. I also have a link here at the bottom. The Center for Plain Language is where I got these tips from. They help government agencies and bureaus write in clear language. So that might be a resource that you find useful to find a lot more tips on how to use clear language. And again, the first sentence can be read and made sense by adding by zombies at the end. So we want to avoid sentences that sound correct with zombies in them. So we talked about using active voice, we don't want to turn verbs into nouns. Now here's a mouthful of a sentence, and I'd like you in the chat to try to make it much clearer using far fewer words. So let me read it out loud to you. 3 options were explored for the reduction of the cooling load, which included reduction of plug loads, reduction of air leakage, and maximization of shading. Ooh, that's a hard sentence to say in itself, and that's 25 words in one sentence. So help me in the chat to make the sentence clear. You could break up the sentence. You could turn nouns into verbs. You could also use active voice. So go ahead. And if someone wants to peek over at the YouTube stream and let us know what's said over there, that'd be awesome as well. So Janice said, to reduce cooling load, we tried reducing plug loads, air leakage, and shading. Excellent. So I will say though, Janice, we wanted to increase shading, not reduce shading, but very good. You'd reduce the number of words there. Steve said, reducing plug loads and air leakage while maximizing shading are 3 options for reducing the cooling load. Excellent. So you flip the structure where you said the solutions and what it was for second. And then Michelle said reduction of plug loads, reduction of air leakage, and maximize shading are 3 options explored for the reduction of the cooling load. Awesome. And then Carrie said options used to reduce the cooling loads included reducing plug loads, ... Very good. Excellent. So you can see how we can say the same thing in multiple ways. Some ways are clearer, some ways are not as clear. Some ways use lots of words and some ways use fewer words. So when you're crafting your sentences for your slides or for verbally speaking, just keep those in mind. All right, so we went over planning in depth. So let's go on to the audience. Again, in the next week's conference, you might be talking to architects, engineers, building energy modelers, other professions. You really don't know who's going to be the majority in your audience. Even if the conference itself is targeted toward a different audience, I'm sure that there's going to be individuals from different industries that will attend. You also want to focus on what's important. So you want to adapt your talking points to the audience. If you are a graduate student, for instance, giving your thesis defense, that's a whole different audience than someone who's attending a conference. You also want to focus on what's most impactful for the audience. So if you're giving a thesis defense again, maybe your impact is to show that you've become an expert in this area and that you deserve to go to the next step. But if you're going to the conference, maybe you want people to walk away with, oh, look at the cool tool I developed. Look at the cool analysis that I did. Let's offer up some case studies where we can learn from each other. And the last but not least is to stay organized and stay focused. I know sometimes we want to tell the really large story. We want to give people all the details, but sometimes it's okay to cut out the details to focus on the story, to focus on what's important. And remember that one sentence that we crafted earlier, you want to always point back to that. because hopefully people walk away understanding that one sentence. And if they want to talk to you afterward, they can ask questions. They can approach you during a mealtime or in the hallway. And those are really the most effective interactions that we can have at conferences, for instance, is those interactions afterward. All right, so here is a slide from my past. It is from my thesis defense. Now, don't look at it too long, your eyes might hurt. But I was trying to show my thesis committee that each of these black dots represented a vertical pole where there was 4 sensors, and that each of these sensors measured directions in 2 directions, X and Y. And we chose these sensor locations based on evenly distributing the sensors, but also where they might actually physically be. Now you're wondering, why am I showing you this slide? I'm showing you this slide because I would like you to see if you can help me make this slide more general for audiences who may not be on my thesis committee or who may not understand sensors or sensor placement. So this one might be a little difficult, but I'm going to challenge you all. You all did such great work in the last 2 exercises. Even if it's just visual, well, how can I make this slide better? You could say fewer words, more pictures, split it up into several slides. How do you think you would have understood what I just said? How would I be able to present that better on screen? All right, Michelle said color. Yes, I could definitely use more color to coordinate what I'm talking about with what I'm showing on screen. That's very good. All right, Alex said have a 3D view that shows poles so the audience can visualize it easier. Yes, that's very good as well. So right now you're looking at a 2D picture. If I wanted to show a 3D, I could manipulate this image or have a 3D image. Excellent. Anybody else? Janet said, show a video clip. Yes, that's a great idea so that I can walk people through how these sensors are moving, what they're measuring. Excellent. Yes, and the tools, the visualization tools that you have at your fingertips, free ones even, are much better than the ones I had when I defended my thesis more than 10 years ago. And then Julian said, try to point the important features out in the pictures. Yes, that's very good. So instead of having a static slide, I could animate the slide so that each portion that I'm trying to highlight, it comes up on screen so that people aren't bombarded with too many images and too many words at once. Excellent. All right, I hope you'll take these points into your next presentation. Excuse me. All right, let's keep going. So again, we talked about planning, preparation, practice. I'm going to have to ask you to do that out at home. But practice just means practicing, getting your slides up, talking out loud. You'll be surprised how much of a difference a speech is when you give it out loud versus just in your head. So give it out loud. You can even use the PowerPoint feature to time how long your presentation is going to be. Always try to speak slower than you think because we tend to speed up if we're nervous. So those are just some tips. Well, let's move on to consistency. So remember, consistency is that 3rd P, which should be a P, but it's a C because that way we really focus on it. And we want to focus on consistency because we want to make sure that our speech is balanced. So earlier in the planning stages, if you're given 60 minutes block time, how do you spend your time? Do you want to spend your time on all the topics equally, on more importance on one topic versus another? But you want to make sure it's balanced so that people don't walk away with, oh, wow, they spent so much time telling me what they did, but I really didn't understand why they did it, or vice versa. And again, is my presentation always pointing to that one sentence? You could write a 100-page report on the work that you're about to present, but unfortunately, you don't have time, and the people in the audience probably don't have the mental awareness to be able to understand everything that's in that 100-page document. So you want to make sure that your presentation is always pointing to that one goal, that one moral of the story, that one sentence. You also want to ask yourself, are my visual aids clear? One of the things that always irks me the most is when people apologize for a very busy slide. instead of making the slide less busy and then not having to apologize. Or if you really need a busy slide, please don't apologize for it at all. You don't need to tell the audience that you're sorry for a busy slide, but you want to make sure that they're clear, and you want to make sure that there's no inconsistencies because they can be distracting. So here is a slide also from my past. I think this is from an ASHRAE conference. So don't look at it too hard, but I want you to think about what inconsistencies do you see? The one story that I'm trying to tell is over here at the bottom. Is that the improvements using the CONTAM method of doing things is better than using the energy plus way of doing things on the y-axis. And I'm trying to show that we can save more energy using this CONTAM method. But how could my visuals tell the story earlier? So I'm going to flip to the next slide. This chat box is going to disappear, and you put into the chat everything you see wrong with this slide or things that this slide could improve on to help me tell my story clear. All right, so I took away that box, and go ahead, put in the chat. You're not going to hurt my feelings. Tell me all ways that this slide could be improved. Okay, inconsistent. Steve says inconsistent text sizes, bullet indentation, and different text colors. Very good. I did those on purpose because sometimes when you paste in from different presentations or you paste in from a report, it will show up as different text, but just take that extra second. Make them all the same size, the same color, the same font, and that way people aren't focused on those inconsistencies. All right, he got the easy one. Who else is next? How else could I tell this story better? Is there too many images? Too few, too many words, too few words? I could say if you take away the energy savings, then plot energy use for both and content. All right, so instead of just looking at the airflow results, you could look at the energy loss to really make that clear. And Adriana said the slide is busy and it has different font. Completely agree. Very busy slide, Olga says. And let me tell you, besides all the font changes and the color changes, this is a slide that I have used in the past. So, as I said, a skill of presenting is gained. You can improve on it, and you're definitely not born with good communication skills. And I still have a long ways to learn. So, thank you all for that very good feedback on this slide. Make it less busy. If I'm focusing on energy, then plot the energy. And then Olga says the chart can be hard to read. Yes, using small font can make things very hard to read. And you don't want people focusing on how hard your slide is to read. You want them to listen to you. The slides are there to help, but you really want people to listen to you. So if you make your slides too busy, too hard to read, then people are focused on that and they've forgotten to listen to what you have to say. All right, so we talked about consistency. Let's move on to performance. So what will the audience walk away feeling? And how can you get the audience to be excited about your work? Can you show enthusiasm? Next week at the conference, if you're able to go, you'll be speaking in person. I know this might be the first time people are speaking in person for the first time since the pandemic started. But use your hand gestures, use your body movement. It can be scary, but doing all that things engages your audience. And then what will the audience walk away remembering? So remember, you could have a 100-page report on your work. It could be detailed. It could detail every step of the way, all your references, all the data that you collected. But people sitting for 20 minutes, an hour, cannot walk away remembering all that. So what do you want them to walk away remembering? Did you focus on that one moral of the story, that one sentence? What are the impacts of your findings? Tell them why, because they'll be able to buy into your work when they understand why you did the work. And then maybe paint a picture of the future. People may want to look forward to what your work can do, what kind of impact it can have. So here's my question to you, and this is also a self-plug for myself, but I would like you to put in the chat, what did you think of my performance? Did you feel like I was excited about effective communication? What will you walk away feeling, remembering, or thinking? And also, how do you see yourself presenting the next time you're at the podium? Do you feel like you have more skills, more tools in your toolbox? Put your honest feedback in the chat. And this is also an opportunity for us to learn from each other. I see some familiar names in the chat, my coworkers, my colleagues, my friends. So you all can be the most critical if you would like to go first. All right, so Stuart says you are consistently one of the most engaging and well-prepared speakers I have ever heard. Oh, thank you, Stuart. Your check's in the mail. You don't have to be so kind. Just kidding. All right, Janet said good energy, enunciated, well appreciated. Alex said, I thought you were passionate and I'll walk remembering the 5 Ps and by zombies. Excellent. I did want you to walk away with those. And Michelle said, good, Lisa, you don't use and ah a lot. Toastmasters, I have to say, really takes that away from me because I notice those when other people speak and when I speak myself. Steve said, definitely engaging and passionate. Voice was not monotone, which makes it easier and stay engaged. Thank you so much. See, these are my friends. I paid them all to say nice things about me. So how about others who came to the talk who did not know me before? So Alex, thank you for those kind words. Any other criticisms or improvements that you think I could be made? I'm totally open to them. Or maybe you can put in the chat, how do you feel like this has helped you to prepare for your next speech? I would love to know. All right, Nico, great job. Your willingness to be open and share your past slides and experiences was very impactful. Thank you. Yes, I had to dig those out from my past. Appreciate that you learned something from this. And Olga said informative, engaging, and interactive. I appreciate that as well. It can be really hard to give a virtual seminar, so I'm really glad that you all participated in it because it definitely was a two-way street. Adriana said, very engaging. Keep your audience involved. Going away with tips on the 5 Ps. Yes, thank you very much. Yes, I'm so glad that you'll all walk away with the 5 Ps, especially with that C right in the middle, to be consistent. And I hope that you can be just as engaging in your next speech. And then Santiago said, you are focused on the purpose of the presentation, how to have better communication from your experience. Well, thank you so much. I'm really glad that all of my slides pointed to having the 5 Ps for presentation, and hopefully you walked away with some practical tips as well. So I'm going to wrap up this presentation now and then open up for question and answer. So again, public speaking can be very scary. Don't get it. Don't be intimidated by it because it can be something that is less scary when you practice. So planning, preparation, consistency, practice, and performance. Other additional tips, if you would like them, is that we're not going to be perfect at public speaking, but we can always improve. Definitely time yourself, especially for conferences. I always appreciate it when speakers are speaking within their time. Count your filler words, ahs, so you know. Everyone has a different lovely filler word, so maybe find out yours and try to reduce them. And as much as you don't want to hear or see yourself speak, recording yourself is a really useful tool to see if you have tics that you don't know about, if you have filler words that you don't know about, and if there are ways that you can improve your tone or the way that you give it. And then consider joining Toastmasters in your area. A lot of clubs are meeting online if you prefer, but there are also clubs that meet in person. And be positive and let your excitement show. Make sure that your facial expressions, your tone can convey that you are excited about the topic that you're speaking about. And then draw the listener in, have a really good introduction, and stick that landing like a gymnast for that conclusion. And that way people are engaged at the beginning and they walk away going, wow, I really understood their work. I really enjoyed their presentation. I would love to talk to them after their presentation. And that can open up a lot of doors. So again, thank you to ABIPSA USA and also the research committee for having me here today. Really glad to share these tips with you. And I really hope that they help you in your next presentation, not to be so scared, but also to have a good time. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Alex to see if he wants to moderate the question and answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. I really enjoyed that. And for those of you who don't know, I've done Toastmasters in the past, and like Lisa, I recommend it. It's a great experience. And if you need help with getting the practice, Toastmasters is a great way of doing that, because sometimes it's hard to kind of push yourself into doing that, even if you're just recording yourself at home. Like, just, sometimes you need a little push, a little motivation. So I would recommend Toastmasters or something like it. And I did see, it looks like maybe in chat there was a question. Stuart was asking, how do you record yourself to practice? So like, what tips you have for like software or ways to record yourself?
Yeah, great question. So I've used my phone. I've sat in my car, which is really quiet. I pressed the record button and I spoke to my phone. You can also do it on your laptop or your computer. Just open up the camera app and then press the record button. You can also do it through voice. If you're going to be giving a recorded seminar using your voice, PowerPoint has an option where you can record your voice along with your presentation so that the slides match up with your voice. So those are the three options you can use. No special software needed.
Great. Don't see any other questions at this time, but feel free to put anything in chat or the Q&A, and we'll get to those. Maybe I feel like I'm kind of curious if the attendees could raise their hand or put something in the chat to say whether you're going to be a presenter at the BPAC conference next week. Just curious. And I'm trying to think, is there any other questions I have for you, maybe?
Well, I will say that Toastmasters is $45 for a 6-month membership, so it's pretty affordable compared to society membership. But it is very fruitful, and if you're able to dedicate an hour every 2 weeks, an hour maybe outside of the meetings to prepare for speeches, I have found it to be a good regular practice of communication. And I think I saw one hand go up about the conference for next week. So I forget who it was now, but good luck to you. I hope that you present well next week. I hope that the tips helped you. I hope you get best speaker at the conference. All right, so Steve put into this chat, is it generally a better practice to have active slides where bullet text or images appear when the presenter is addressing that individual topic rather than everything appearing all at once? Seems like audience will focus on reading ahead or interpreting figures rather than listening to the presentation. Yeah, that's a very good question. So remember that one busy slide I put up? One of the recommendations in the chat was to either use color or use animation to focus on things. So I believe that if there's too many animations, like if there's like too many slide transitions, if things are flying in and out of the screen, that can be distracting. So use them wisely. Think about if you can cut things down first before you use too many transitions. And any animations or transmissions that any transitions or animations you use, I would say keep them simple. People find this is my own personal opinion. I find transitions to be exciting for the first time, and then after I see it a while, then it can get pretty distracting. Oh, Olga said, could we post the link to next week's conference? Perhaps Alex could do that. Oh, yes, there it is. It is in Chicago, correct? It's in Chicago next week.
Yes, I believe so. Mm-hmm. And I'm also going to put the link for, if you're interested in learning more about the research committee, there's that link. And after the question period's over, I have some things to wrap up as well that we can talk about some other things. But
sure. And I'll put in a plug-in for a subcommittee, the BIPSA MIXA subcommittee or working group within the research committee. We plan these virtual webinars. And so if you want an opportunity to learn, or if you want an opportunity to practice your speaking, please come to one of our meetings and we can get you as one of the speakers for our MIXA events.
There's a question in the Q&A. Can you see that, Lisa? Okay. I don't know if she wants to talk it or not. I'll go ahead and unmute you just in case. Let's see. Oh, here. Yeah, okay, you should be able to talk if you want. Although since you're an introverted person, maybe you don't want to. I'll go ahead and read your question real quick. I am calm and an introverted person, and I find it difficult to speak in a crowd. How do I improve my communication?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Something you'll be surprised to know that I've not always been comfortable speaking in front of people. It comes with practice. I like Toastmasters because it's a small group of people. who meet regularly to practice these skills in a low stakes environment. So you're not speaking with like your managers or the president of your company. You're basically talking to friends. And so if you can find a way to regularly practice speaking, whether that's with a small friend group, with Toastmasters, it's very important because often we can go all day without speaking to someone, especially if you're working virtually or remotely. So having that practice is really key. So like if you speak a language other than English, if you're learning to speak English, you want to have that regular practice, that immersion. So same thing with public speaking, you have to have the regular practice immersion in order to improve, and you will improve. You'll get much more comfortable with it.
Great. Let's see. I'm not sure if this is a question, but another thing, I guess, kind of a tip is related to the slide question. Sometimes, and I'm not always great at figuring out like a good image, but sometimes it's good just to have like a slide with a good image on it, like, something that's thought-provoking or something. And then you're kind of doing most of the talking. It kind of depends on what the topic is, but I think really you mentioned like not putting too much on this slide so that you don't want the audience to be distracted by trying to read what's up there and not listening to you. So just keep that in mind.
I mean, maybe us as technical speakers are not comfortable with speaking in a way where we don't have a lot of text on screen. But if you watch a lot of TED Talks on YouTube, you can find them. If people do use slides, it's very simple because they want people to listen to their words, and the text on the screen, the images on the screen is just to complement it. But I know we're probably not all ready to go there yet because we do want to put technical things on. But if you can lean toward that direction, I promise you people will be more engaged. They won't zone out in the middle of your presentation. They'll really want to listen to what you're saying instead of what's on the screen. And all in all, even if you didn't get to say everything in that 100-page report, you got to tell them what's most important, and then they can engage with you afterward. And people can ask questions because you left stuff out. People will ask questions, and I love Q&A. It's the best time to interact with your audience and to really demonstrate that people are interested and we're actively listening. So feel free to leave stuff out of your presentation.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Alex, you're welcome to wrap up. I left my email address. I can put it in the chat if anyone wants to email me. I'd be happy to talk. I won't be at the conference next week, but I do attend ASHRAE conferences quite regularly. So I hope to see you all one day in person. So thank you again.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, well, thank you again for everybody who joined today. And a few housekeeping items I have are that if you want AI learning units, then you need to email that I just put in chat with your name and your AI member number. And let's see. Again, a reminder, if the link I set up, I posted above, oh, sorry, Nathaniel reminded me there's no AI learning units for this. Thank you for that. And the link I sent above that starts with forms.gle, that's the link for expressing your interest in the research committee. And if you were watching on YouTube, and I see, I think looks like I'm the only one on that, so I don't need to talk about that. But the video will be, once we're done, the video will be on YouTube to view later. And I also want to mention next month that Taylor Ryan is going to present on solar decathlon, building the next generation of building scientists. We don't have a date for that yet, but keep an eye out for your emails to see when that's going to be coming. And that's all I have for you. Good luck on your presentations next week and in the future, and hopefully you can find ways of getting good practice in. Thank you, everybody. Is Carrie Thompson? I'm not sure what CPS credits are. If you want, you can add more details in the chat on that.
All right, then I guess I can get going then, right?
Yeah.
All right.
Great day.
Thank you. All right. Bye.
Bye. Okay, I just let you talk if you would like to. I could probably ask, in terms of agenda, we can ask Lisa to send out her slides. And there, I believe there was at least probably an agenda slide that went over what the presentation was about.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, it's okay. I can turn an agenda in. It's certified prevention specialist. So we get, we have to have so many hours of classes, and I can turn the agenda in for that. But that's okay if I don't have one. That's fine.
I think the slide, actually I have her slides open on my screens. Let me just check real quick. I guess there wasn't really a beginning agenda slide. But I could ask her she could probably make one. I will, are you on, how did you hear about this? Like, are you on the BIPSA email list, newsletter or something?
I'm really not sure who sent it to me.
Okay.
Someone sent it to me. I can send you, I'm going to put my email in the chat.
Okay.
If you could just email me a copy of it.
Yeah, sure. Sounds great.
Yeah, we do a lot of public speaking, a lot of presenting, and so this was actually very well done. It's a lot of help for me.
Great. I'm glad it was helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anyone else that's on have any questions or anything I can help with? Well, in that case, I will close down the webinar and let you have a few more minutes. Thank you again, and I will talk